Welcome to Wake Up Express in our final week. As we're getting to what we were kind of wanting to get to is the discipline aspect. And discipline, as the Bible calls it, is love. And discipline, let me read you the scripture out of Proverbs 29:17. Discipline your children. So the Bible tells us, remember, we live our life based on what the Word of God says. Discipline your children, and they will give you peace. They will bring you delights you desire. You know, you can see parents who they've gotten their kids into the, they're teenagers, and they have no peace, and they're not delighting, and it's not joyful. And most of the time, you'll find that they disciplined incorrectly, or there was not really much discipline at all. And so the Bible says, hey, if you'll discipline in the right manner, in the godly, biblical manner, then it's going to bring you peace. You enjoy every season of life. You know, from toddlers to junior high, they kept saying, well, wait till they're in high school. Like, I enjoyed high school. Well, wait till you have a girl. Well, have a girl. And so this is, and what this program's about is this flow chart that you're doing is going to give you the specific ways in which to discipline. Every child is different, remember that. But the flow chart still worked correctly. You'll come out with an outcome of how do we discipline this child in this moment. Remembering this, discipline is simply change direction. What do I need to do to change the child's direction? So this week we're on correction.
Can I interrupt you?
Please.
Okay. So one of the things that I love about the word discipline is a root of it is to disciple. Mm-hmm. And I love when, if you err on the side, if you know this about yourself, if you know that you can kind of lean a little legalistic and you're kind of like, I'm a rule person, knowing that one of the roots of discipline is to disciple, I think really helps create some balance. Like you kind of understand, especially in us talking about correction, you're really, again, the root and the point of discipline is to disciple your children, to disciple them in how they should be acting and to disciple them. I just think it removes, I think discipline, for me, it can seem so legalistic and hard and whatever. And not to say that we don't have to sometimes be like absolute, but I love that there's like, I feel like when we think of to disciple, it just, to me, it brings in a softer side. It brings in the heart aspect too of why we want to change the direction. We're discipling them. We're trying to lead them in such a way that's going to be a blessing to not just their lives, but the lives of people that they interact with as they grow into teens, as they grow into adults. And so for me, I love that. I love keeping at the forefront of my mind that is a root of discipline, is to disciple, that is the verb.
We're trying to grow them. That's really good. Mm-hmm. All right, so on your flow chart, the first part is correction, which is B3. And this is where many parents can make a pretty big mistake. And so under that, you're going to have B4 is childishness and B5 is foolishness. And this is really hard. I mean, very important, because we have to look at the intent of the heart. What was the child's heart? And there's a very distinct difference between childishness mm-hmm. and foolishness, mm-hmm. right? A kid spilling their milk, walking through the house, that's childish. That was an accident. A child who you said, hey, carry it with two hands, and they kept carrying it with one hand and then spilled the milk. Well, now we've gone into foolishness. And so we have to be, as parents, the first thing is we have to be able to identify, okay, was that an accident or was that on purpose? Was it an act of rebellion in the heart, which is foolishness, or was it just kids do kid things? And it doesn't mean that we don't still disciple them. Mm-hmm. We don't, change direction on certain things, but how we do it is very important.
Yes.
So childishness is a mistake. Foolishness is a rebellion. But if you discipline foolishness as if it's childishness, you will raise a fool. If you discipline foolishness as childishness, then childishness as foolishness, then they'll end up resenting you. Mm-hmm. And so it's very important that we as parents are able to kind of navigate that whole process. Mm-hmm. All right. C1 is the first thing that you do is I have to determine if it's childishness or foolishness. So under C1, we determined that it's childishness. We're going to do a warning. It was a mistake, right? They carried their milk. You're like, hey, be careful with your milk. It's important. Use two hands. One of the good examples, I think, is, you come home, maybe the kids are playing video games or something, and you're like, hey, let's go out to eat. And they get all excited, and they run upstairs, and off you go, and you come home, and they left the TV on, they left the games out. They left, they didn't clean up their mess. It wasn't an on purpose. Even if they know, to me, they knew they're supposed to clean up, but you understand it was the excitement of the moment. They're kids being kids, and they forget. And so you treat that very differently than if you had said, hey kids, before we go, make sure you clean up all of that, and then we're going to leave. And they still left and didn't clean it up. Well, that was foolishness. That was a rebellion in their heart. So on childlessness, C1, it'll be a warning. C2, it might be related consequences. So you're going to have to determine which one this is. Is it a warning, or do we have to move into more of a related consequence where in some ways it makes sense? And so under that, it's going to be a couple different things on related consequence. It could be property. So the first time that my kids maybe did the video game thing, that's fine. But let's say next week, same thing happens, exact same thing. I'm like, okay, well, we didn't change direction with a warning. So now we got to have a consequence. We got to bring a level of pain into their life. And so the level of pain, maybe you say, hey, tonight we're going to clean that up, and there's not going to be any more video games tonight, or maybe even tomorrow night too. I just need you all to learn that, even though we're excited, I get that, but we still have to be responsible and be able to remember. Property could be, so you take it away. C4 is a privilege. Sometimes you determine, okay, they need a consequence, and they're not ready for a certain privilege. Olive, I give her, I fill up, she's like, oh, I want Fruity Pebbles. I fill up her little cup with Fruity Pebbles. We go sit down in the room, we're watching it, and then you look down and it looks like just the Fruity Pebbles, we had a storm. There's Fruity Pebbles everywhere. And Gigi's coming in the room here, so we got to.
Who really should be getting the consequence?
I should get the consequence. So this is
because
for me.
Because there's no reason why there should be. I mean, seriously, like it's like you've got your toes over the line.
She's talking about the next series called Train Up a Husband. That's not this series.
Yeah, that's a thing.
This
We're
is
gonna
not
do
this
that
series.
one because who lets a young person have like
Grandpa does
Fruity Pebbles
one time.
Fruity Pebbles.
And then
do you know
I
how
tell
small
her.
They are?
Then I let her
in an
know.
open container? Are you nuts?
Then we go to C4, where she loses her privilege. She can't handle the responsibility, nor can I, of having Fruity Pebbles in while we're watching television. So now she gets a little baby cup with a little lid on it, and then we eat it in the kitchen. So
I love when he tells on himself on,
for millions to see. So train up a grandpa now.
Yeah, it's coming.
It's coming.
Coming
and
soon.
so you remove, there was a privilege with it. They can't handle the responsibility of it. So, until you can handle it, we talked about that in previous channel topics, that if you can't handle responsibility, then I must take the responsibility away until you can make good choices with it. C5 is personal responsibility. And so sometimes, even though it was an accident, our kids got to take personal responsibilities. They borrowed a buddy's bike and they wrecked it and wrecked the tire. And you get up and it's like, okay, I get it was an accident, but we are responsible and that's not your property. So now we have to fix it. And so you're going to have to work to pay that off. You have to take responsibility. Life has accidents, but in life, when you have an accident and you are responsible for it, well, I want to raise up kids that take responsibility for their own accidents in life. I was playing, me and Jason, I had to be 9 or 10, maybe 11. Jason was like 7 or 8. And we thought it was a cool idea as we were trying to get good at golf, of grabbing my dad's golf clubs and balls and in the backyard hitting the golf balls over the fence. For some reason, that was a cool idea. And it was great until Jason put one right through my parents' bedroom window where my mom was studying the Bible. And it was, yes, it was dumb. Right, when I look back on it, and right, it was unintelligent. My dad's like, "Why would you think that you could hit golf balls over the? Who knows what damage we did over there, right?" Until we hit the window. So our consequence was we had to pay for the $32 window, and you're like, "Well, it's not the end of the world." It is when you only make $2 allowance a week. There's 8 weeks of working to pay off the window, and I still remember it today. And it kind of carried through me when we're doing something else. I kind of look and be able to go, well, that's not intelligent, right? We can break something. And so it carried with me of that personal responsibility. Proverbs 22:15. Now we're going to get into foolishness. A child's heart is filled with foolishness. And this is interesting because you always get those people who are like, well, kids are born, innocent. Well, obviously you haven't been around a 1-year-old or 2-year-old. Like I didn't teach my 1-year-old to bite. They just bite when they don't get their. You know what I'm saying? They don't throw a fit. We didn't teach them a fit. I didn't get on the floor and throw it and go, this is how you do a fit. Kids are born with rebellion. And so a child's heart is filled with foolishness, but somebody say physical, discipline will drive it far away. So if I don't drive away the foolishness, then I raise a fool. And that's our responsibility. This is where gentle parenting doesn't work. It just does not work, because all you're doing is trying a way to keep that child in that foolishness. You're not doing anything to drive it out. And once again, it's not biblical. The Bible says here, this is what my Bible says, it says physical discipline. So remember, once again, discipline is about changing direction and bringing pain to their life. And I don't want to raise a fool. It's important that you watch on the rebellion. There is outward rebellions. You may have a kid. Every kid's different. You may have a kid that outwardly you can see it. Like they walk through the house and they slam the door. You're like, well, that's rebellious, right? That's not how we do things, right? They throw a tantrum. It's easy to see. But the most dangerous one is sneaky rebellion. Sneaky. It's the haughty eyes that the Bible talks about. It's the roll of the eyes. It's talking under their breath as they're walking away. That's rebellion. And oftentimes parents will overlook that little thing, not realizing that the little things become the huge things when they're teenagers. That once again, we raise our kids to the biblical standard. This is the standard, and rolling your eyes at me isn't producing a habit. When your boss asks you to do something, you roll your eyes or you talk behind. That's not going to produce a great future for you. And so it's my job to drive that away from you, and Holly's job to drive that away from you. On that, you have what's called the foolish filter. And the foolish filter is just that. I want to go through this filter and come out on the other side of how I respond to my children, what the next level of discipline is. And so number one, you're going to go through this, and it'll come, once you've done it a while, it'll just come naturally. I have to take the age of the child. There's a difference between a 3-year-old doing something that's foolish and a 10-year-old. So what's the age of the child? I have to do the frequency. You may have a junior higher just has a bad day. Mm-hmm. And so they're almost always great kids, but today was bad. So I got to take that into context. Rather than a kid that it's been a couple weeks now, we're dealing with stuff every single day. Number 3, the context. An 8-year-old that lies about peeing in the bed is different than an 8-year-old that lies about hitting their sister. The context, I get it. You're embarrassed. You don't want to say. And so you lied, but I get the lie. So there's a difference in that. The 4 is the overall kid. Great kid. Or even a little handful for a little while. And so I got to take that into context that, sometimes we just do things and, right, it's just a one and done, and it's not going to take a huge discipline. It may just take a little talk. And so I have to take that through there. Number 5 is the punishment has to fit the crime. So I have to process that everything that I discipline my children with gives it a value. So a kid, kicks his sister, hits his sister, and they go to the room for 10 minutes. And then they break a vase and they get a spanking. So the vase, right, that was a bigger deal than hitting the sister. And so there was a value put on it. So we have to make sure that when we discipline, that the punishment does fit the crime, that we don't over and we don't under. And it's hard to find the sweet spot, but we become great at it, just finding, okay, what can I do to change their direction? And number 6 is it's got to be a reasonable time. It's not like, hey, dad's on a trip, he'll be home in 4 days and you'll get your discipline then. That's exasperating to sit around and wait for dad to get home for 4 days or whatever is going to happen. Or we had people in our lives that like, well, she's getting a spanking, we haven't done it. I'm like, how long? Well, like, we just haven't had time, we've been busy, it's been like 5 days. I'm like, they're waiting for their spanking for 5 days?
Well, and I think one of the parents was kind of like didn't want to be that person, and who does, right? Like who, I think you need to check yourself if that's like your go, if that's your go-to, and you don't, it's not hard. Like it should be hard as a parent. Like we never want to like be intentionally harmful to our kids. I don't want to hurt my kids. And so, but it was an insane thing. Can you imagine being like a 4-year-old and you're waiting and that like you've done something and it's like day 5 afterward, you're just like, what? Like, yeah. So be swift. Like don't labor and draw it out.
Draw it out.
Come on.
All right, so you go through the fruit store, you're going to come out. Is it just going to be a warning? You might come out and go, I'm going to give them a warning. They're a great kid. Let's give them a warning. You might come out with warning and removal. Let's say sometimes a kid can't handle the responsibility. So kids, let's say Baylor's running around the pool with his friends. I'm like, hey, don't run. And 5 minutes later, like he's all caught up in the motion. I'm like, all right, Baylor, come on over here. I need you to sit down with me. And then I say, hey, we're going to sit here for a little while because obviously you can't have the responsibility of being with your friends right now because you're not listening to me. And so I removed him from it. The Bible says, remove temptation from me. And sometimes we got to remove temptation. If they can't handle it, we've had people in our world who their kid plays, certain video games and they're just aggressive. Their boy gets aggressive and they're like, okay. Now their brother can play it and they're fine, but you can't play it. And I get that it's just the way it is. So right now, until you can handle it, we have to remove that from your life because it's making you do things that you feel like you have no control over. And so it might be removable. All right, now we get into pain. Somebody say pain. Pain. The pain part of it is consequences, number 3. So E1 is pain. Life has consequences. As parents, we're basically teaching and training that life brings you pain. If you're really bad to your spouse, there's going to be pain. If you're a lousy worker and you're, there's pain. If you gossip, there's the pain. So when I don't follow the Bible, world seems to respond with a sense of pain in my life. And so pain should push us away from certain behaviors. And that's our goal, is to bring a level of pain into their life that pushes them away from certain things. So E1 is pain. God designed pain. If I touch a hot stove, it hurts. It deters me from hot. If you touched a hot stove and it felt, euphoric, it was amazing. Well, the people would be, they'd be hitting the hot stove, and God's saying, no. Don't want you to burn your skin, so it's going to bring pain to you.
Can I add something really fast?
Please do.
One of the big things that I think is out there oftentimes, and it causes me to pause and think about that, and especially since we've authored this program, and that is that, this concept of training your kids to be afraid of you, training your kids to fear you. And I have to think about that, because is it that or is it that I want them to choose right? There's a couple different ways you can look at it. There's 2 perspectives to that comment. It's not that I want to train my kids to fear me, but if mom and dad are the bigger picture of the bigger world right now, right before they go out into the big bad world, they're exposed to a crazy boss, or not wanting to do the work, or being lazy or whatever. Is it really that we want to instill in them a fear, or is it a different perspective? Can we look at it from saying, no, I'm not trying to train my kids to fear, but I am training my kids for the other perspective of that, and that is to choose to do the right thing. And how else do you train them to that? Without instilling some conflict or some pain that then has them go, ooh, I don't want to go, that route. I mean, how do you train animals? How do you train,
Fear.
Well,
Max is afraid of me.
But that's my thing.
If he goes to the bathroom in the house, he's very afraid of me.
I was trying to eliminate us.
He's very fearful. You can't even find him.
But I guess what I'm trying to say is why do you do what you do the right way and not the wrong way?
You don't want consequence.
Right, but why? What's the root of that? Come on, the root of not doing it the wrong way is always going to be fear. You cannot try and train somebody to do something the correct way without the wrong way being or causing an element of fear.
That's why the Bible all throughout talks about fear God.
Well, I mean,
in a sense.
And do we have to really train them to do we have to train them about fear? I mean,
but our kids don't fear us; they fear the consequence.
And I think
and that's good.
And that's, yes. And I think when you're endeavoring to do this and you encounter those kind of critical comments, I think you have to say to yourself, but isn't fear a motivator just naturally anyway in the world? I'm kind of is that if we're going to be intellectual and dumb it down and dial it down, isn't that kind of the root of everything negative that we don't want to head toward?
Right.
And so, like I said, you're not training your kids to fear you. You're training your kids to want to do a right thing. And it feels good to do life the right way. It feels good to do life the way that the Word would have us live and not the alternative. So it's, maybe we just, as we're doing this parenting journey, maybe we really try to come at it from the different perspectives so we don't beat ourselves up and feel like we're these lousy people that are instilling fear into our kids and fear that they can't come to us. It's like, no, I want my kid to honor. I want my kid to want to elicit a way to go from me. And so is the alternative fear? And again, I would say to you, is it really a wrong motivation?
No. That's good. We have very good relationships with our kids, but there's times in their life, if you're going to be rebellious, or maybe one kid raises their voice to mom, then you'll have alpha dad on you, and there will be a level of fear that comes upon you in that moment, and that's okay. I like that, because I am an alpha, and it's still an alpha. I don't care how old you are. So I get that the fear is there. Yet we have very good, trusting, loving relation. Our kids come to us as we go to God. Life has its results, and we're teaching kids results through pain. So E1 is pain. There's two types of pain. F2 is natural. F3 is structural. There is natural pain in life. Mm-hmm. You tell your kid, don't run around the pool. They choose to run around the pool, and they fall and they scrape up their knee. Mm-hmm. I don't pick up that child and put them over my knee. No, they've already had their consequence. And then I reconfirm why you listen to dad or mom. I go, hey, dad's not trying to take your fun. This isn't fun. I'm trying to keep you having fun. So when we ask you to do something, it isn't because we're trying to be mean. It's because we realize that there's consequences out there. And that reiterates as they get into high school when I say, hey, don't hang out with those friends. This has been built up year after year, that mom and dad's voice, there's a reason between our voice. We're just not trying to make your life miserable. We're actually trying to make your life better. And so oftentimes there's natural consequences. So we come out, we're like, they got their consequences. F3 is structural. It has to be something that brings a level of pain that also changes their direction. And there's three types of this. There's logical. So F4 is logical. You can remove a phone. That brings pain for some. You can remove games. They can lose their car. There's a lot, something that they get home late. Like for our kids, it's like, hey, this is the curfew. If your curfew's 10, you don't get in at 10:05. So now I have to bring something logical. So I go, oh, you can't handle 10 o'clock. So now your curfew is 9. And they want to argue. They're like, oh, no, that's not fair. Okay, well, now it's 8. Would you like to continue to talk? No, I'll do 8. Okay, now when you can handle 8, then we'll talk about 9, and then we'll talk about 10. There's a level of pain to that. Why am I so strict about being on time? If you call, I get it. You don't call me at 10. If you're supposed to be home at 10, you don't call me at 10, because I'm getting you ready for a job. I'm getting you ready for responsibility. You call me at 9:30, go, Dad, crazy. Can I get home at 10:15? And I'm like, yeah, that's fine. I get that. You tell me whatever's going on. But I want my kids to be 15 minutes early. If it's 10, then be home at 9:45. Why is that? Because you have a job. Things are going to happen. I want you to be on time. So we're always training our children. So consequences, we got to find their kryptonite. Many parents, a kid comes home, they yell. There's no consequence, right? I see parents doing that. They're just late all the time. They're supposed to be home at 10, they get home at 11, and the mom yells at them for 10 minutes, and the kid goes upstairs. And the reward was greater than the pain. Does that make sense? The pain has to be bigger than the reward. So I can take my mom yelling at me for 10 minutes if I can stay out later and have fun, right? And so we have to make sure that the pain changes direction, which means we find their kryptonite. F5, it might be isolation. It's not timeout. I don't think timeouts work, other than what we talked about with Fitz, when they're in control of how long they're gone by basically getting themselves under control. So isolation is more of a time of a kid kind of a tantrum. A couple kids are arguing. Holly was great at this. They can't get along. So she goes, oh, go sit on your bed, you two, until you are best friends. You're going to sit on your bed, and they'll just sit on their bed and then they're like, all right, we're buddies. All right, come on out here. And so it's a great way of bringing some pain in the moment. They had to stop playing, and there was a teachable moment in that. And then F6, of course, is our last result in a sense. And F6 is spanking. Spanking done right is the greatest tool that we have, I believe, at our hands. Spanking done wrong does more damage. And so that's why we teach it at the very end. It's in the way it should work is it should be more when they're young. It's like a funnel. And then little bit, if any, as they get older. If I do it when they're young, when they're 3, it's different. We talk about it in the thing, and you have to read about that. 3-year-old, I'm not going to put them over a knee. It's usually just like a little boop, just a little something, just to bring a little physical pain into the world. That's all that it is. 4 years old, maybe a little bit more structured, and you get to about 5, and then it kind of becomes more of a structure thing, which I go out of, I go into that. But when you're consistent and you're raising, I don't remember spanking Savvy and Peyton. I don't remember it. I don't know if the older kids say, hey, just be good and everything's going to be great. I don't know. I just don't remember. They just always have been such great kids. Baylor's had some. We kind of, Lakin was our guinea pig, so he probably got more.
Well, I think parenting. I think we started. We really.
We gained more wisdom.
We were those people that kind of rolled the dice. We tried. When Lakin was little, we really didn't even take a parenting class until, I read books and I read up on different things and then just going off of the way we were parented. Lakin was probably 2 and before we really got a hold of, wow, we
gave him a lot of bad habits in those 2 years.
We're not really, we're not excelling at this thing very good. It's a lot of work. And
it was horrible.
It was awful. But, I am a firm believer, mentioning Peyton and Savvy, the last 2, I'm a huge believer that if you will really be mindful and all in when they are tiny and they are infant, and when you are all in on the concept behind the first time obedience and the purpose behind it, and teaching them that they have the power to control and manage their emotions, and that their emotions are for them, right? I really truly believe the other stuff is less. I really believe that. And I think we got to that point with Peyton and Savannah where it was more, I was all in, and it was exhausting when they were younger. I feel like I did a lot more hands-on when they were little, but man, I think that's the why. I think we were really just intentional in the younger years. And so when they got to that point where maybe, more of a physical discipline or spanking or whatever, I don't remember having to utilize. It wasn't a tool I used.
They never need one.
Because we had really focused on those younger years and getting on their little level. And I remember holding onto their hands when they were, getting so frustrated. And I remember just telling them, breathe through this. You've got this. You're getting yourself all worked up, and just calm down. And then praising them when they were able to. And when you do that, it's crazy how you start to see that just snowball as they get older into bigger issues. And it's life-saving. So if you've got those of you that are here right now and you have young ones, just
put in the time.
Oh, yeah.
Because you'll put in the time. If you don't put the time in when they're young, then it just gets harder when they get older.
Yeah.
And your funnel may start. Somebody may have 8-year-olds and 9-year-olds, and your funnel might be right. You may get to there. To me, it's kind of that last resort. Like, hey, it's just your direction's not changing. And to me, I'm like, the next time this is going to be a spanking.
Correct.
And this is the way that it is. And that's been a big game changer for like Lakin, Heath, and Baylor at times at 7 years old or 9 years old. This is what's going to change your direction. It always has for us, been the big game changer. And so we go into great depths of how to do it, make sure that you do it right. It's not abuse. It's actually done in love. And you'll see as we talk about, there's times with Lakin's a great example where you can tell that kid, he's just angry, he's upset. Shame and guilt and that stuff just builds up in a kid when they're doing wrong. And a spanking is just like a reset. And all of a sudden the kid, he's just happy. He's great. It's been released, and we forget about it. They forget about it. We move on. And but as we became better parents, I think that we did more things before the age of 5 in the right way, and it just made everything easier. And so really focus on the positive side of discipline, which we talked about last week and the week before, of encouraging good behavior. Focus on those things, giving them the warnings. Hey, we're going to grandma's house. How do we act? And when you focus on that stuff, you'll find that your kids tend to follow the positive stuff more often. But once again, the Bible says sometimes there's some foolishness in there, that physical is what's going to drive it out of them. And we're a testament of how it works. It worked in me. I got quite a few spankings growing up, and they were all game changers for me. Every single one of them was a direction change in my life, and that's why I believe it. And my dad did it right, and I teach how to do it right. Does that make sense? So anyway, we'll love it. We're always here for you all if you ever have questions or anything, or with your leaders and stuff. And we've enjoyed this, and we'll probably ask, maybe Betsy will ask some surveys of how the Express was. I do believe, me and Holly have talked, I think we're going to go back to, I think we can do it in probably 8 weeks, go into a little bit longer version, be able to spend some more time on some stuff. I think is what we're going to do next year. But anyway, we enjoyed this time, and it was nice to get it done at 6. But I think we need a little bit more time next time. Anyway, give the Lord a hand clap. Be blessed.